Hey, Derek Keet, Remax Elite.
Mark DeMong of 97th Street Law.
Yeah, thanks again for joining us, Mark.
My pleasure, glad to be here.
Yeah, so today we're talking about title insurance, RPR, so the real property report, the differences, what's necessary, when, how long it takes, these sort of questions that pop up regarding those two. So before we get started, please like, subscribe, give us a thumbs up. Thank you very much. All right. So first of all, I guess what is title insurance? What is RPR? I guess those are the two things that kind of pop up, and what kind of how we can use those, or how are those good tools? Yeah.
Well, very useful tools. And let's, from a buyer's perspective, let's look at it. If I'm buying a property, I want to know exactly what I'm buying, and I want to know, with respect to any particular lot, what is built on that lot. Are there any issues with a neighbor's development, like a fence or a driveway encroaching on my property, or is there something on the property that I want to buy that's encroaching on a neighboring property or a city property? So a real property report is a diagram of the lot, the real estate that you're buying, as well as showing every development on the property. So it'll show the dimensions of the house. If there's a driveway, it'll show the concrete poured for the driveway. If there's a deck on the side or the back or the front of the property, it will show the deck. It will show the location of a fence, if there's any fence, or even something like a shed. If there's a shed in the backyard or something like that, it'll show. So all of the developments that are associated with that real estate will show on the real property report. In the old days, we used to call that a survey of the property, showing not just the lot lines, but the developments on the property.
Which I think also comes up, so when you have, the buyer is going to buy the property, right? And a lot of the time when you have, like, let's say that deck or that back shed, or that these different developments have been added to the property through the years, we want to know, do they have permits, right? So are they actually belonging to that property, or these sort of things as well, right?
Well, good point, Derek. What the survey tells you is what is built on the property, but the survey doesn't tell you, the real property report doesn't tell you whether or not there's been a permit issued. So once a person has that real property report in hand, that real property report can be delivered to the city along with an application fee. In Edmonton, it's $140, and then the city will review that the real property report, and it will tell if there was a deck that's built without a permit. The city will let you know. Or another thing that comes up is if that deck is too close to the side yard, if it's not set back far enough from the neighboring property, then the city is going to notify you of that. So again, back to the buyer looking at a real property report, that's very good information for you to know before you remove conditions.
Or there's a deck, but it's not on the property report.
Or even that, so if a seller has a real property report from, say, 2010, and then in 2015, the seller builds a deck on the property with or without a permit, looking at that 2010 real property report is not going to show you that development that happened in 2015. So that's another thing to keep in mind. As a buyer, when you look at the real property report, you want to verify that everything shown, or everything that you see on the property, is shown on that real property report, so that you know it is current.
Right. That came up once where they had a deck that was built, but it wasn't, they didn't have a permit for it, and it was extended past where it was supposed to be. So it was breaking, it wasn't set up, so before everything could go through, the deck needed to be completely removed. So there's these sort of hiccups, or these sort of things that can happen, right?
Oh, absolutely, and that's, you make a really important point. So from a seller's perspective, a buyer looks at the house and walks through and says, wow, that deck is beautiful, it goes from side to side, and I love it, and that's why I'm buying the house.
Right.
And then the seller finds out that, oh, I didn't get my real property report updated after adding that giant deck without a permit. And the seller finds out when he's applying for the permit that the deck is too big, and it doesn't have the appropriate rails, and it's too close to the side yard. Now, to make that deck comply, maybe it's a matter of just going by with a skill saw and cutting a part of it off and moving the handrail.
Right.
But now the buyer who fell in love with that house because of the deck is looking at that property and saying, oh, I don't want a property without that gorgeous deck. And
comes a lawsuit or whatever.
So the litigation lawyers will make out just fine in that case, but nobody else will be happy, and that's problematic. So
Right.
from the seller's perspective, you want to make sure that the property is saleable either with that real property report, and I think you're going to get to this in just a second, but I'm going to jump ahead, or the seller says, well, I knew that I should have got a permit when I put that deck in place,
Right.
but I'm not going to update my real property report. I'm not going to apply for a permit. I'm just going to offer the property for sale, and I'm going to pay for the buyer's title insurance.
Correct, yeah. Because the other problem is the real property report, it takes time too. It's not something that you just order and it's done the next day. Like even especially if the property is outside of the city or it's farther away, it's even quite difficult to actually get it done in many cases as well, right?
It can be, and there's a cost associated with it, of course.
Yeah.
The surveyor that we work with in the city charges $550 for a real property report. You can pay upwards of $750 plus a travel fee if you're getting a property surveyed that's out of the municipal limits of the city of Edmonton.
So usually, how long does it take?
A surveyor likes to have 2 to 3 weeks to do the survey, and in busy times it will be at least 2 to 3 weeks.
Right.
The company that we work with generally can turn one over within 4 or 5 days, but it's one of those things that, again, it takes time and it takes money, and certainly you can get it done for a rush fee if you want to pay a bit extra. But
and the other point to consider too is even if they have an old real property report, it can still be stamped, it can still be verified as well, which is also kind of saves a little bit of time.
It would. If a person has a real property report that is dated, sometimes you only get one done. Yeah. Sure, it can still be valid as long as it shows the existing developments on the property. The date doesn't matter so much as whether the real property report shows the existing state of developments there. For sure.
And I think usually if you've got like let's say a pipeline going underneath or something, it's usually not added. It's usually kind of in there, right?
Well, a pipeline going under the property might not show, but what a title inquiry, and a surveyor will do a title inquiry when they
or the rights to, the rights to the access,
right? They'll show the right of way on the survey, then they'll draw that on to the plan. A person sometimes gets concerned that, oh my gosh, there's a right of way going across my property. Well, yes, there is. But if the right of way is for power or gas or water, then you want that.
Yeah, you don't want to take that out, right? You don't take your water away, or yes, for sure. And then the other idea, we were talking about title insurance. So the idea with title insurance is that if it doesn't, let's say there is a problem later, then that's basically covered, right? So there's insurance in there to, if the buyer buys the property and there is a problem that was not known before, right?
And that's key. Yes, title insurance maybe is comparable to health insurance in that respect. If there's something that you want insurance for and you know it's a problem when you're applying for the insurance policy, the insurance company might not decide to issue that policy.
Right.
Now, some title insurance companies still will, if you know that that you're paying for the policy because there's a particular problem. If you disclose that in your application, then at least the adjuster at the insurance company, or the underwriter, not the adjuster, the underwriter can have a look at that and decide, yeah, you know what, we're not too concerned about that, we'll still issue the policy. But primarily, the title insurance policy, keeping in mind this is different from your comprehensive insurance or your fire insurance policy. This is about the title, not about the whether or not a person is going to lose the house by virtue of fire.
Correct.
And so the title insurance policy is going to cover losses that will come up for defects in the title that, generally speaking, would show on a real property report.
Right.
So back to that deck example, if the seller decided to list that property without offering to buy a new real property report, if that seller says, you can have the property as is and I'll pay for your title insurance, the cost of that insurance policy is usually about $300, maybe a little bit less, maybe a little bit more.
Right.
And the title insurance policy will cover the owner of that property, if it's an owner policy, and usually they are, will cover the new buyer for that property in the event that they have to incur any expenses to make that property comply with existing bylaws.
Right,
And the expense in the deck example would be to make that deck comply, and there are two ways to do that. One would be to get the municipality to issue a variance saying, we don't authorize decks like this as a rule, but in the circumstances, we'll make this one okay. So we'll issue a one-time order. And the alternative is that the owner of the house would have to correct that deck and make it comply. So if there were costs incurred, the title insurance policy pays out to cover the cost of making that deck comply with the municipal bylaws.
Perfect.
Now, there's one other thing that a title insurance policy covers. Thankfully, it's not that common that a homeowner is going to experience this, but title fraud, you hear about it on the news a couple times a year for the most part.
Right.
And thankfully, that's all that most people will ever come across, a title fraud. But the example that you often see on the news is that a person is away for study at university for an extended period of time or something like that, or just out of the country, and somebody, fraudster, figures this out and decides to make a fake ID and visit with a lawyer and sell that property.
Right.
And of course, that's a title fraud. Title insurance will cover you for your losses in the event that your identity is stolen and somebody sells your house fraudulently.
Awesome. All right. Well, there's a little bit about title insurance and the real property report, the RPR. Thanks. If you have any questions or anything, leave them down in the comments below. And thanks, guys.
Glad to be with you again, Derek.
Thanks.